that sometimes just a memory will come back to us because we have looked at something, we have heard a song, some type of trigger that brings us back into our past and some fond memories. Well, in 1947, when I was 8 years old, when I was living at my grandpa's house in Hopedale, Ohio, I would curl up every day in the big overstuffed chair next to the long windows where the light was good, and I would read Charles Dickens stories from books printed by P.F. Collins in New York in 1870. It was a collection of books that my father had inherited from his mother, and he brought them with him from Washington, D.C. to Ohio when we moved. And yesterday, while cleaning out an antique corner cupboard of mine here in South Beach, I discovered that set of books that I had read so long ago. And of course, I took them out one by one and flipped through the pages, and it brought back so many memories of my childhood and that long summer that I spent in Ohio living with my grandparents. Flipping gently through the pages and thinking about how small the print was now that my aging eyes, I came upon a pressed wrist corsage of roses, now the color of tea leaves, tied with a pink ribbon, and they used to be pink roses. How on earth could I have forgotten that it was there? So many years ago, I had put that between the pages. The complete work of Charles Dickens. Believe it or not, I read each of those books that had belonged to my father. I read Dickens stories with their beautiful etchings like they used to do in the old books. They just were outstanding. Each and every one, from cover to cover during that summer. Those stories and all of the characters within that book took me on adventures in my imaginations that kept me from the loneliness of living on an isolated farm among the cornfields. I had an older brother that ran off with his friends and they didn't want anything to do with me. So the loneliness and those books kept me from being completely depressed that summer. The books were initially owned by Ida F. Spangler, who roomed at my grandmother Atkinson's house in Washington, D.C. for a while. And inside her delicate handwritten observations and notes were written on the forward pages of some of the books. And it was told to me she was a descendant of Edmund Ned Spangler, who was involved in the Abraham Lincoln assassination. He was a stagehand at the theater and was asked to hold the horse on which John Wilkes Booth escaped. He was eventually acquitted, but did spend time in prison. He died in 1875, 5 years after these books were printed. That fall, when I returned to school, I was asked to read a narration during a piano recital for a boy that I had a crush on, Douglas Tipton. He had old rosy cheeks, and as I remember, dark hair, and he wore glasses. I thought he was the handsomest boy in our class. I was truly smitten, and probably he was my first love. And when he asked me to be a part of his piano recital, it was the best day of my life so far. The rose wrist corsage was from Douglas. So many years ago, I had slipped that corsage between the pages of my favorite books from the boy that had stolen my young heart. My mother made me a beautiful long gown from pink taffeta with wide straps that caressed my shoulders and had a ruffle around the bodice. I remember she pulled part of my hair back with a comb and put bobby pins in it and let the rest of my long blonde curls caress my shoulders. I was so nervous standing up there. I think I had red blotches all over me before Douglas started playing his solo. But I was sure that I could do this for the rest of my life as long as it would for my handsome Douglas. And there they were, 76 years later, discovered again by that little girl in the pink taffeta dress. Honestly, I'd totally forgotten about them until I took the books and I found that corsage tucked between the pages of one of my favorite stories. Today, I have decided, instead of putting the books back into the dark interior of my corner cupboard, I'm going to give them life again by sending them to my son. I'm not too sure in this digital age whether any of my grandchildren will curl up in a corner of their house where the light streams in for good reading and open any of the pages that entertained me so long ago, and I think it's pretty sad. Times have changed so much. But at least they can breathe new life in the bookcases in my son's hallway. Hopefully, patiently waiting there for one of my grandchildren to reach up and take them from my shelf. I only wish. And my corsage? Well, I'm leaving it there because it's lived happily between those pages for all these years. I'm letting it stay in its resting place. Maybe one day when my grandchildren or any other curious reader reaches up and opens the book, they will see the corsage. Will they be curious and wonder why it's there? Perhaps this small, mysterious remembrance of their Nana or someone they never knew will stimulate their imagination too. And just like Charles Dickens did for me all of those long years ago. Well, all of that got me to thinking about my life and the ups and downs. Now, like most of you, I've had a life full of swings, all kinds of swings, emotional swings, financial swings, life event swings, and mood swings. But nothing can ever warm my heart more than a swing hanging from a sturdy branch where I can let the cool breeze pull its fingers through my hair, kite my skirt, and fill my heart with memories and feeling of being a child again. There's something about a swing I just can't resist. I am always reminded of my childhood and the poem by Robert Louis Stevenson when I think of swings. How do you like to go up in a swing? Up in the air so blue. Oh, I do think it's the pleasantest thing ever a child can do. So many of my memories in my childhood have been involved with swings. Going to a one-room schoolhouse in rural Ohio when I was a young girl, still living at my grandpa's house, and having recess where I could swing. I would take that trusty old girl as high as I could dare to go, holding my head back as far as I could without slipping off the seat. I would watch the clouds move with me, back and forth, challenging the dizziness with my head. The tire swing that my father put up for us when I was about 8 years old. We lived near a big, bubbling and winding creek where Daddy hung a big rope around the strongest tree, strong and rough, and he found a tree limb into which it could be tied. My brother and I would swing out over the edge of the water, hanging on for dear life, fear of falling into the tumbling water below. Oh, how I can remember, it was so exciting. It was fun. Just the feeling of the cool summer air swished by my body with each swing still remains in my mind. Oh, the joys of being young and fearless and not afraid of what could happen if I slipped from that big old tire swing. With most of us, if we let it, childhood will never leave us. It's still inside of each and every one of us somewhere. But the years has passed, probably for both you and I, and life has moved on without a swing. For me, at least. Until my son put up a swing from a very strong limb for his young daughter, Lucienne. He hadn't a clue that that swing also would be for me, his 86-year-old mother, who has never lost her love for a swing. But I was around 81 when he put it up. Every chance I got while visiting my son and jogging down the winding driveway past the aging fir trees on his property, I could never resist, no matter how urgent my task. I would always stop and take a ride and reawaken the child inside of me on the swing that hung from the strongest branch that was made for Lucienne. But unfortunately, on my last trip last summer to Nashville, the ropes on that swing were tattered and torn, and the swing was no longer there. Age and the weather had worn the swing throughout the years where Lucienne used to swing as a little girl. Well, she's now 17, and that swing had weathered all kinds of temperatures and rain and snow and wind until finally it just wore out and is no longer there. So I missed that swing the last time I was down at my son's, but luckily I could jog down or walk down to the end of his driveway where he has put up a nice porch swing. So I found myself last summer sitting down by the creek and swinging on that porch swing that would bring me back to my love of swings and great childhood memories. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you will tune in again for conversations on Bridges Through Time.